Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am here with my lunchtime chat. I appreciate you joining me, and it is sponsored by Our Black Hair Matters. And today we are going to discuss how to prevent hair loss and promote hair growth. So those of you who are joining, welcome, and please put your name in the chat. I'd love to know who you are. And if you don't know who I am, let me take some time to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Crystal Porter, and this is a live online broadcast platform dedicated to elevating the Black hair care industry and empowering consumers and hair professionals with education that is driven and backed by data, scientific research. That's what we're all about. So as you put your name in the chat, please let me know where you are from. And then also let me know who you are, meaning that if you are a hair practitioner, please put in the number 1. If you are a consumer, put in number 2. And if you are a researcher and a scientist like I am, please put in the number 3. Hello, Yolette, good to see you. Great. And let us know, well, I know who you are as a practitioner, but put in the number 2 so other people know who you are as well. Would love for you to share the broadcast. Don't be stingy. Go ahead and let other people know what you're doing and what I'm doing, because I am going to share some great information and I am excited about doing so. And so for some of you who may be on here for the first time, I just want to ask a couple of questions, because for those who are frustrated with the lack of information available when it comes to caring for your hair, or if you have wasted a lot of money, time, and resources just trying to figure things out on your own, then you are at the right place. So really, I invite you here to come every Monday where I either am flying solo, which I am today, or I bring on guests who I trust, because you are here for trusted information. And so if you are wanting to learn a little bit more, I do have a freebie. And if you want to know about the biggest mistakes to avoid when caring for your hair, which are like a lot of curlies, people with curly hair, then please put in that you want more information, or you can go to bit.ly/OBHM consult. And I'll put that in the chat so you can put that in there. Hello, Andrea. Thanks for coming. Yolette said that she is a practitioner and a consumer also. Awesome. And Michaela, welcome. All right. So we are going to get started because, I oftentimes reflect on just encounters that I have with people and conversations that they have. And a lot of times they want to ask, all the what I think are hard questions, because we all want simple answers to our questions, right? And want to know exactly what we need to do to have our best hair. And oftentimes it's not that simple. However, I try to remind myself that there is some information out there that people may not know that they would appreciate, and it comes second nature to me, but for others, they may not know it. So this is what I'm here to talk about. I want to talk about the causes of hair loss and how to prevent it. I want to talk about some remedies and quote unquote cures, and then provide you with trusted resources for help. So without further ado, if you're just now joining, please put your name and who you are in the chat and where you're from. Would love to know that as well. And we are going to get started. So today's topic is about hair loss, but I wanted to start off by defining it, because a lot of people they say they have hair loss, and I make an assumption of what hair loss is. Sometimes I just think that you're losing hair from your follicles, and that's more hair shedding, right? But then you can also have hair loss because the way you recognize it is usually from looking at, the sink and hair that is there, or your shoulders, or your styling implements such as a comb or brush. And so hair loss can also be hair breakage. And so I wanted to start off by saying that there are mainly 2 forms of hair loss, in the sense that the way that we describe it. shedding, which is also known as alopecia when it actually comes from the hair follicle. Shedding, you can have natural shedding, which is normal to lose anywhere from 50 to 100 fibers a day. So I know no one is really going to sit there and count out 100 fibers, and 100 fibers looks different depending upon whether your hair is short or it's long. So you can say, oh my God, I have all this hair, when in actuality, you have longer strands. So it looks like it's more than it actually is. But even estimating, just counting out 10 fibers and saying, okay, this looks like 5 times of this 10 or 10 times of this 10. And if it's in that range, then it's totally normal, right? But we get really anxious and concerned when it's more than that. And you should be, because if you're not in that range, then you really need to start looking at some other things that could be going on. And so one story I want to give is a woman who came to me within the last, well, it's probably closer to 5 weeks now, but she said that she was having hair issues. She was told that it was breakage, but she wasn't sure if it was hair loss or not. And normally, it's only been 2 times that I felt like compelled to see people face to face, or see someone face to face, because normally I try to give my team the inquiries that come in, right? And so with this particular person, she was complaining about hair loss, but she said it was breakage, but then she wasn't too sure. So then I wasn't too sure. And hearing what she was saying, it sounded like it could have been hair loss from alopecia, meaning it was coming from the follicle, but I couldn't be sure. And so when she came in, I told her, okay, it's definitely breakage. There were some grooming things that was going on. And so it was an easy referral to send her to a cosmetologist, because that's really what she needed. And not just any cosmetologist, because unfortunately, this particular woman was going to a cosmetologist, but she wasn't going to the right one. And so I tell people all the time that the best type of hair loss to have is hair breakage, because if it's hair breakage, you usually need to change some things up in your routine, change some of your products, and then you can actually stop the breakage and your hair will grow. And so I was relieved that she was having hair breakage, referred her to someone that I trust, and all was good, right? And so I want to talk a little bit more about the causes of hair loss. So when it's breakage, as I just said, a lot of times it's styling and product usage, or using the wrong implementation, or using the wrong setting. And, so all of that has to go into knowing exactly what you're doing. So getting information about your styling routine really helps me out and my team out to help you to understand exactly what you could be doing wrong. But let's talk a little bit about shedding, or the alopecia, where it comes directly out of the follicle. And so when it comes out of the follicle, and it is alopecia, if it's over 100 fibers or more, it usually is due to a number of things. And so you hear a lot of people give presentations, and they have this laundry list of different types of issues. So I'm just going to highlight just a few. For Black hair in particular, for Black women and some men, especially since a lot of people are wearing locks, and you wear locks and they get heavy and it's pulling. So traction, which is that pulling, that is a big cause of hair loss within our communities. And so being careful to make sure that it's not a lot of tension or pulling, especially if you have those micro braids and you have a lot of hair dangling from it, I mean, it's gonna pull. And so that is not good. The other thing, genetics and hormones, unfortunately, that happens, both men and women go through the hormonal change. And so a lot of times you have male pattern baldness, or androgenic alopecia. A lot of times it is genetic, so that is a cause. And then lack of nutrition, or your diet. We hear a lot about that, and I say that with caution, because you really do need to be under someone who is either a certified dietitian or nutritionist or a physician. I would never recommend that you just change your diet just based on something that you've heard. But even a couple of weeks ago, when I had Dr. Tamika Ellington on, she shared that she was having some hair loss issues, and she found out that she had a zinc deficiency. And so after she started supplementing that in, then she was able to see some of the regrowth of her hair. So, but she was able to do that under a physician's watch. So knowing these things about yourself really can help. And so sometimes it's zinc, sometimes it's iron, especially if you are still menstruating. That is something that's prevalent, unfortunately, for women. I know that I struggle with low iron. So just knowing your numbers is good, and being directed by a physician. But sometimes, you know, your B vitamins are off, but sometimes even protein, especially with this trend of everyone going vegan or vegetarian, just knowing how to make sure that you're getting enough protein is really important. In this day and age, especially with the pandemic, everybody's being stressed, right? A lot of stress. And so that is one thing that is a trigger for people to lose their hair. So Taria says, those are great distinctions. Okay, hair loss versus hair breakage. Thank you. And then Taria also says that you've noticed that with locks, with the hair loss, unfortunately for you, you did lose a lock, and it would be in the back. Oh, okay. And so usually because the constant pulling made it thin at the root. Yeah, that does happen. It is, especially with locks. And as you're manipulating your hair, some people are just more susceptible to having that breakage, especially depending upon the type of products you have and depending upon your hair itself. Sometimes if you have thin fibers, like I do, unfortunately, my fiber diameter is below average. And so me personally, I would be very afraid of getting locks and having them grow long, because I know that my hair itself wouldn't be able to withstand the weight of it with the hair strand, but also my follicles would not be able to withstand that weight either. So thanks for sharing, Taria. Yeah, so lots of stress out there. And so you have to be extremely careful. You know, of course, getting exercise, getting that blood flowing is really good with circulation, because of course your hair follicles need the oxygen. So getting, you know, that heart pumping is great, but keeping, you know, your stress at a minimum, if at all possible, is also good. Looking at your health and drugs and autoimmune diseases, unfortunately, there are a number of drugs that cause alopecia. I would say to consult a physician. I would say specifically a dermatologist, because they have more information about drugs that are affiliated with hair loss. But that is something that you need to be aware of. And then I could not be in this pandemic and not mention the hair loss that is associated with COVID-19. And so unfortunately, there have been reports that after someone has had it, as they are recovering or a couple of months afterwards, some people are experiencing hair loss. And it's not unusual for people who are recovering from any illness or disease to actually have that happen. So just be mindful that not only with COVID-19, but other illnesses that you could be recovering from, that is something that happens. The good news is that after your body is through with whatever illness, a few months later, your hair will start regrowing on its own if you are healthy. So just make sure that you are under a physician's care and you're able to make sure that your health is monitored. So Susan Deming says, thank you, Dr. Crystal, so much for the wonderful information. Thank you, Susan, and welcome. Really appreciate you being here. And so these are things to keep in mind. And so how to prevent it is really just being aware. When you are aware, then you can, you know, do whatever it is to try to circumvent whatever the problem is. And if you need the help from professionals, which I'll talk about a little later, there are some things that you can do and like have resources that are in your pocket so that if you have the need, then you can actually go to a resource and get the help that you need. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about remedies and cures. And so cure comes from someone who came to me and was like, you know, I'm tired of putting a Band-Aid on something. I want to know what the cure is. And so I had to add that because I wanted to just be honest with you. Hair loss can be maintained, or you can regrow your hair if your hair follicles have not been scarred over or permanently damaged. You can usually regrow your hair, but a cure is a tricky word because when you think of curing, it means that it's never going to happen again. And because we are beings who change, our environment changes, there are a lot of things that go on in our lives. It's hard to say something is going to be cured. So I would use that word with caution. Even if your hair does grow back, there are many other things that can happen that can re-trigger hair loss or just make it happen even if you've never had it before. So remedies is really a treatment for it. And there are things that we know as scientists that have data to back it up, which is one of the reasons why I do this, because I want you to have a trusted source, because I am all about the data. And if you're out there, put in hashtag show me the data, because that's really what it's all about. Shanae, thank you. Thank you for joining, really appreciate it. And let us know who you are. If you are a hair practitioner, put in the number 1, a consumer, number 2. And if you are a scientist or a researcher such as myself, put in the number 3. I really am interested to know who's out there. And so let's talk a little bit about these remedies. So recently, like last week, I was listening to an interview by a fellow scientist by the name of Tom Dawson. And he worked for Procter & Gamble a long time ago. And he was talking about an experience that he had as a researcher. So I thought it would be good to share just to set the tone of what to expect when it comes to treatments or remedies. So he was discussing how he was fresh out of grad school and he had done a lot of work with looking at the microbiome, which is really basically looking at the microbial environment of, you can look at the microbiome of a tree, but in this instance, he was looking at the microbiome of the scalp and its relation to dandruff. And they were able to identify other species of Malassezia, which is the yeast that is usually responsible for dandruff or has been known to be responsible, but they didn't know so many species existed. So he was sure with this new revolution of information that he would be able to identify the particular species who was responsible or that was responsible for dandruff. And so there was a lot of money, a lot of resources and people and time dedicated to this study. And in the end, when they looked at people who had dandruff versus those who didn't have dandruff, what they were able to see was there was no difference. So the same species existed regardless of whether or not they had dandruff or not. And so as a researcher, it's, you know, you get out of school being bright-eyed and bushy-tailed with all these ideas and you're going to go out there and save the world, right? Or at least help people who are in need, or the environment or the planet. So not saying that researchers who don't study people aren't relevant as well, but you come out and you have all these ideas and then your hypothesis, which is an educated guess in terms of what would happen, it doesn't happen. And so I tell people all the time, even if your hypothesis does not show what you predicted, your educated guess, it still is useful because it lets you know a direction that you should not be going in. So it's just as impactful. But the short of the long story is basically you are different. And so that's what we need to do as researchers, is understand what's going on with us in particular, right? And so what I'm going to tell you in terms of the remedies that are used are things that have data behind them. And so you're going to notice that I am not going to say castor oil is going to help regrow your hair, because there's no data to show that. And that is something that I get asked about a lot. But I will share some of the things that are used over the counter as well as prescribed, and some things or some options that you can have based on what you're going through. So want to talk about what's like known topicals. So you have minoxidil, which is brand name of Rogaine. So there are a lot of people who don't want to use over-the-counter drugs, but to be honest, there is data to back up their efficiency. And so they are effective. And so you want to at least know about things that are effective. And am I a fan of all of these remedies? Not really. I like some more so than others, but I want to just let you know that if you go to a dermatologist, that is definitely an option that they will give, because there's data to back up that it works, right? And that can be used for men and women. And then the other things, if you end up going to well, that's not a topical, so I'll just leave that alone. There are some corticosteroids that you can actually apply. You can be prescribed a corticosteroid, and it can help to decrease the inflammation. And so that's something that's often used, and you have to go to a dermatologist to be prescribed that. Minoxidil is over the counter. And so I wanted to share those, because you hear, like I said, about the castor oil, and you think that that's going to work miracles, and that's not necessarily true. But then you also have a lot of shampoos that are marketed for hair regrowth. And to be honest with you, most shampoos that are effective contain some degree of minoxidil. So because it is an approved known effective ingredient, a lot of times it's not only in a spray or a solution that you can put directly on your hair, they also incorporate it in hair products such as shampoos. So that is something that is used. So you can look on the label and see minoxidil there. The other thing I wanted to talk about was other things that you can take like orally, because I would say the number 2 question that I'm asked is the use of the effectiveness of supplements. And that's a whole nother conversation. And all I can say is, if you use supplements that are designated for hair regrowth, one, you're not, whoever is selling it isn't supposed to sell a supplement for hair regrowth unless it has been approved by the FDA. So if you see that, be a little leery about it, because that is something that is not always right on the label. A lot of supplements are regulated by the FDA, but it's not policed, right? So they may say it's for hair loss, but if it is stated for hair loss, it is technically a drug, because it changes your cellular makeup. But Viviscal is something that's been on the market for a number of years now, and there is data to back up that Viviscal actually does help. It's not 100%, but it does help with some, and there's data that back it up. And then something that came out more recently in the years is Nutrafol. And so Viviscal and Nutrafol are over-the-counter supplements that you can get. You can buy it online, and it has been shown to help with certain types of hair loss. Let me be very specific. So if your follicles have not been scarred and they will regrow hair, then it helps to keep your body in the environment to make it more conducive for hair growth. The other thing that you can take internally is Propecia, which is finasteride. So that's only for men though. So that is something that has data as well to back up its efficacy. So also know about that. Taria says, where can you find more information on what is approved? Is there a site? You know what, great question. And I'm going to talk about this a little later, but what I can say is anything that comes through the American Academy of Dermatologists, AAD, I think it's aad.org, if I'm not mistaken, www.aad as in dermatology.org. So you can go and look up information on there. Excuse me. So excellent question, Taria. Thank you. And so spironolactone, that is something that is prescribed for women to take orally that can help with androgenic alopecia, or something that is based on heredity. So make sure that you go see a physician, and they should give you like all the options. So thank you. Yes, aad.org. Thank you, Taria. Appreciate that. And so someone came up as Facebook user. And so I don't know why some platforms only say Facebook user, but if you can put your name in, whoever just said hello, I would love to identify you by name and let us know who you are. If you are a practitioner, if you are a consumer, or if you are a scientist or researcher, I really appreciate that as well. And so wanted to talk a little bit about physicians and things that they can do. So we talked about the corticosteroid injections, and I know a lot of people are scared about that. And when we had Lisa Marsh on, when she came on back in January, she was sharing about her experience with having hair loss and having to go through the injections and being scared. But one thing she also shared is that they were effective. So anytime we have inflammation, that is something that the physician can do if it results in hair loss. So, oh, Nadia, okay, yeah, I didn't know you came up as Facebook user. I'd be really curious as to which Facebook page you're coming from, just because it says Facebook user. Yeah, just being aware that there are some things that you can take, or just some of the things that the doctors will do that you may leave you a little anxious, but they do work. A lot of people are scared of them. There are some professionals, hair professionals in particular, who are not fans of it, but just at least realizing why it's being used, and there's data to back up that it works. So that is something that is just to be aware of, right? I want to talk about laser therapy. So this is having laser light that is at a particular frequency or wavelength. And we don't really quite understand why it stimulates the follicle to regrow hair. There's more research that is needed to understand the why, but we definitely know that there is data to back up when you use it, it increases your chances for hair growth. So a lot of these treatments are used together so that you have more of a chance to regrow your hair. But laser light therapy is something that is useful as well. Platelet-Rich Plasma, PRP, is the short identification for that. That is where they take your own blood and then they centrifuge it or spin it down to separate the parts, and then they put in the part that has the plasma, and then it also helps to rejuvenate hair growth. So that is something that is used. Once again, it involves needles, but it has been effective for certain types of alopecia. So just being aware, and under a physician's care, they'll let you know if you are a candidate for that particular treatment. And then if you have other types of hair loss where your hair won't grow anymore, meaning that the tissue of the follicle has been scarred over and is permanent hair loss, then you have the option for hair transplants. And so that is something that you have to be careful of, because if you just go to a hair transplant surgeon and you don't have a doctor's like guidance, sometimes they don't know if the alopecia that you have is right for it, because you have to have the condition of your scalp has to be conducive to grow hair, depending upon the technique that they use. So it's always good to have a physician refer you to a hair transplant surgeon, because it is important, because not all hair transplant surgeons are created equal. So just making sure that you're going to one who has been vetted and someone recommends as well. All right, so just wanted to give you, let me see, did I go through on, yeah. And so everything that I have stated is based on research. One of the things about diet that I do want to hit on is if you improve your diet overall, all of your biochemical processes are more effective, right? And so you want to make sure that you do keep yourself healthy. And I would say to always make sure that if you change anything, to make sure that it won't be counteractive to any medication that you may be on. And so it's always good to have a physician aware of things that you're doing or changes in your diet. All right, so want to talk about trusted resources for help. And so if there are those of you out there who have experienced hair loss, or you've had, good and bad results or different experiences, I would love to hear about them. So yeah, go ahead and put that in. And so want to talk about the trusted resources for help, because as I mentioned earlier, being under a physician's care is great. And there have been like mixed feelings or some controversy behind who is it best to go to? Is it best to go to a hairstylist, or is it better to go to a physician? And there are pros and cons to both, because at the end of the day, you want your hair to look and feel beautiful, right? And so a hairstylist will be able to give you a look that you want, but sometimes it's at the detriment of your hair and scalp health. So finding the right stylist and someone who can work with a physician is like optimal, right? But I want to start off with the physician, and you want to go to a board certified physician. And there are certain groups or memberships and different certifications that they may have that will help them to be more knowledgeable and more effective in the end. And so having someone that has a great reputation. And when I had Dr. Victoria Barbosa on, one of the things that she said is word of mouth is great. So if you have someone who's had a great experience, then it wouldn't hurt to go to someone who has had a patient who was happy, right? And so finding someone with a great reputation, that is good. But if you don't know anyone and you need some resources, maybe looking at whether or not they are a member of the American Academy of Dermatology, or the AAD that I mentioned earlier. And I believe Taria put up the website for the AAD. So if they are a member of the AAD, you know that at least they have access to the latest and greatest information when it comes to research and things that have data. So that is something that you should put in your arsenal. So Taria asks, are there any particular certifications we should look for? Well, making sure that they are board certified is one. And then this isn't a certification, but knowing that they have a history of serving hair loss patients, because not all dermatologists are good with hair loss or have an interest in hair loss patients. So just making sure that this is something that is that they're passionate about, that is helpful as well. Oh, I wanted to talk about CARF. So while this isn't a certification, CARF stands for Cicatricial Alopecia Research Foundation. And there are a number of dermatologists who are affiliated with CARF. And cicatricial is that scarring alopecia, or the type where your hair will not grow back. Your follicles have been damaged to the point of no return. And so there is a whole different approach that you would have for trying to prevent it, or prevent other hair follicles if you have been diagnosed with a scarring alopecia or a cicatricial alopecia, that you stop it from spreading, and that you're able to maintain the hair follicles that are continuously growing hair. So it is research that's needed, and CARF is really an advocate for understanding why it occurs and how to prevent it from occurring or spreading. And so, Samaria, what are your thoughts on trichologists? Absolutely love them. I give kudos to any professional who wants to elevate their education to further serve their clientele. However, and I will go into this when I talk about trusted resources for help, there are some caveats in terms of trichology that I think people need to be aware of. And so it's important for you to consider a number of things when you are seeking help from a trichologist. And so I love trichology. Most of my students are trichologists, and that makes sense because with me and my quest to elevate the industry and to partner with practitioners who are conscientious and serious about really being a part of the solution, that is really who I connect to, because they further their education by getting a certificate or a diploma, depending upon which program they go through. So yeah, absolutely love trichologists. So thanks for asking that. But before I go to trichology, I want to continue on the dermatologist, because they're just making sure that they have affiliations that are trustworthy. And so this was also mentioned with Dr. Victoria Barbosa when I had her on, and that is the resource of Black Dermatologist Directory. So they have, so if you just Google Black Dermatologist Directory, then their website will come up, and they have a whole list of international resources that you can go to, especially if you are of African descent. Because one of the things that we as Black people need to be aware of is, not aware, that we are like sensitive to, is we know that our hair is a little different, at least when it comes to styling. You know, it's not necessarily going to perform the same way. And a lot of times it's because those of us who are, you know, the more tightly curled cohort in the population, we know that things that we can do to our hair, like some of the shampoos that may be prescribed from a dermatologist, the way that we use them may not be the same way that someone who does not have this curl type. They may be able to find success where it may, you know, make our hair dry or feel dry, look dry, and feel brittle. And so that's something that we need to be aware of. So just knowing that we need to apply it to the scalp and not necessarily work it through the hair, that's a technique that as Black people, we really need to be aware of. Kathy, thank you, Dr. Porter. You are more than welcome. Let me know who you are. If you are a practitioner, let us know. Put in a number 1. If you are a consumer, put in a number 2. And if you are a researcher or a scientist, put in a number 3. Also, be sure to share this. I am also on YouTube. So if you miss an episode or you want to catch up, you can go to YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and press that thumbs up button. All right. So let's go ahead and move into trichology, because I really want to talk about this a little bit. I feel that all trichologists need to be vetted. You need to know how long they've been in trichology, and it does not mean if they've been in 20 plus years that they are the person you should go to, but at least ask the question. Also ask them for referrals. Just knowing that they have some people who have left there happy, that is important. And then you want to know their success rate. And so I'm going to share a story because it will, I think, give you a perspective to what the problem is, or what the problem can be when going to a trichologist, because I think there are a lot of people just misrepresenting themselves. So I've been knowing about trichology for almost 20 years. And the reason being is because with me doing research in industry, there were conferences and they were always at the conference, which is great. Because like I said, I commend anyone who wants to further their education to better serve their clientele. So we're all good there. But I became concerned when back, I want to say this was probably 2014 was the first time that I kept hearing about someone who called themselves Dr. such and such. I know who it is, but I'm not going to talk about who it was. And so when they heard my background in terms of me wanting to collaborate with hair practitioners, they were like, oh my God, you got to meet Dr. such and such. So I finally met this doctor, and she introduced herself, and I was really excited. I was like, wow, this is someone who's pretty much doing the same thing I am. And like I said, I'm all about collaboration. So I was excited to, you know, get to know who she was and where she came from, and, you know, all of her experiences. And so one of the first questions that I asked, because I thought we were getting ready to talk shop, And what I asked was, I was like, wow, sounds like you're doing great things. What is your success rate? And so anybody who knows anything about science knows that when it comes to data, that's something that we will share and talk about all the time. You want to have some numbers behind it. And when she said that her success rate was 100%, I was like, really? I couldn't believe she said 100%, because I mean, even being, you know, in the pandemic and hearing about drugs and, you know, processes, 100% is like a unicorn. That just doesn't happen. And so when she said 100%, one, I knew she wasn't a doctor of a PhD doctor, and she definitely wasn't a medical doctor. So then it made me probe into, okay, where did you get your degree and stuff? So I say all that to say, one of the ways to vet is if they are degreed, because there are degree programs out there. So if they have a degree, then you want to know where it's from, but you also want to know that it is overseen by a state board of education. So if they cannot show that their degree is backed by a state board of education, you need to be, you need to just run in the other direction. Because even though they may not have doctor behind their name, it doesn't mean that they can't help you. It just means that they don't have a doctorate degree, which is fine. We all have expertise that are unique to us. And I think just because you go in a particular route, it doesn't mean that you can't be effective in helping someone. But misrepresentation is just, I mean, if you're misrepresenting that, then it's a whole lot of other things that you could be misrepresenting as well. So Kathy, oh, thank you for saying that you are a certified Sister Locks consultant looking to educate yourself in hair loss. Awesome. Yeah, and your education will not stop. There are new things happening all the time, and I didn't go into that. I think that's beyond the scope of what I'm doing today. But it's good to know that there are some things like follow the AAD, find out what is going on. Also, there like CARF. CARF has different educational platforms as well. So just making sure that you stay aware, but use trusted information, because there are a whole lot of people out there just saying that their stuff works miracles and may cure, and that's just not true. But stay educated. So I'm glad to see that, Kathy, that you are one who wants to be educated. But, you know, looking at, you know, vetting them and asking those questions in terms of, you know, what is your success rate, and where have you gotten your certification? And if it is a degree, then knowing that it is a state board of education overseeing it, that will keep you in the right direction. So you're a registered dietitian training in trichology. That's awesome. You know, I see a lot of that because we know that biological processes in the body are optimized if you have a good diet behind it. So I'm not surprised that you have background in nutrition as well as in trichology, because I think it goes hand in hand. The caveat with that, though, is that it's complicated when it comes to trying to see a direct correlation between diet and hair loss, because there are so many other variables in life in our environment. And one of the things, and I hate to say it because there are a lot of animal activists out there, but as researchers, it's very common for you to use mice as models to really do very controlled experimentation or experiments to see how diet plays a role. For example, there are papers out there, old papers, because before there was hair science, meaning hair from animals. And so the wool industry in particular had a lot of research done, and they did controlled studies where they would feed sheep a particular diet and look at how the wool changed as a function of diet. And there are some research with wool, not with humans, that show a correlation, but you have to understand when those studies are done, they are able to control the diet and the environment of the sheep that they're studying. So it's so much easier with animal studies. And so I say that because that is one of the things that as researchers, we use as a tool to really have more control over all the different variables that can play a role into what we're seeing. And so I wanted to make sure there aren't any other questions. No, they're not. Great. So the other thing that I want to talk about with a trichologist, and I know that this is sometimes a difficult thing to do, and that is the partnership of a hair practitioner with a dermatologist. Sometimes there aren't dermatologists in the area that, you know, someone feels comfortable with, or the dermatologist doesn't want to have anything to do with the hair practitioner because they're not sure if the hair practitioner is going to be on board with whatever regimen they are suggesting. And so there really is a balance, but having someone who partners with a good dermatologist is definitely a bonus, because sometimes it does require, or whatever hair loss issue you're going through, it may require you to be overseen by a physician. So just be aware that it is added bonus if they have a dermatologist that they are affiliated with. And so with that, I want to answer any questions that you may have. But I just wanted to lay it straight. There are a lot of questions that we don't have answers to. Unfortunately, there are way more questions than there are answers, but that really is what this is about. Now, one of the things that I found from speaking to hair practitioners is the phenomenon of hair loss sometimes being cyclical, right? So sometimes you see progress and then the progress goes down, and then you see, you know, great results and then it goes down. So it tends to be cyclical. So trying to understand that with data, that is what's needed. And so that is why I partner with hair practitioners. The other thing is, and I don't know if I have the link, I shared it last week, but tonight, and you only have like a couple more hours if you want to be a part of just an open dialogue, because one of the things that I truly believe in is the need for researchers to partner with those who are right there with their fingertips in the data every day that we need. And so in order to properly partner, you have to know exactly what they're going through and things that they're seeing. And so I say that because the information that I got about it being cyclical came from a conversation with a hair practitioner. I'm like, wow, I didn't realize that. I had not heard that before. So something that is second nature to someone who's, you know, seeing clients day in and day out, that's information for someone like me who is stuck on the outside, or I should say stuck in the inside in the laboratory most of the time. But, you know, I'm outside of where you guys are in terms of your experience and your expertise. And so a dialogue really needs to happen. And so I scheduled one for tonight. So if you don't know, so my Linktree link would have that, and this Our Black Hair Matters is my Linktree. So if we could have that put up, that would be great. And so what site did you mention that does research on? Oh, on CCCA. Yeah, so that would be CARF. So Cicatricial Alopecia Research Foundation, CARF. Cicatricial Alopecia Research Foundation. That is the organization who does research on scarring alopecia, which includes CCCA. There are others, but that's beyond the scope of what we're going through today. I need to invite Dr. Victoria Barbosa to come back on to give more in-depth, to just have a conversation, give information about the different types of alopecia and how it's usually treated. She hit on some of them, but I think going more in depth about the different treatments and, you know, maybe give some stats behind it too would be worthwhile. So great. Yes, there's the Linktree. Perfect. Our Black Hair Matters. And so if you want to join us tonight, I have a limitation on how much I can have people be a part, so it will not be available if I meet that threshold. But just having an intimate conversation so that we can make sure as researchers we're going in the right direction, that would be awesome. And that's what I do periodically. So with that, I just want to answer any other questions that you may have. Thank you, Sinead, for saying that it was great. And I am just scratching the surface. There's a lot more information that we can have so that people can be informed. But I wanted people to really get a general idea of what is available and the type of help that you can have. So remember, causes, it is very complex, but to keep it simple, you know, reduce your stress, make sure you have the right diet, make sure you're not pulling too tight, know about what drugs and what in your health. And then in terms of remedies, there are different ones. Actually going to see the professionals that I talked about, they can guide you to the right ones. So going to a dermatologist or a informed trichologist who is not misrepresenting him or herself. And then, you know, just vet everybody, vet whoever you go to. And so thank you for that. Saying it's awesome. You said, oh, the time for this evening, right? That is important. It's at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. So I'm in the Chicagoland area, so I always go by my time. So 6 p.m. Central Standard Time is when I will be joining the trichologist. And so do you need to sign up? And the answer is yes. If you go to the link tree that's on the ticker below, then you'll be able to see in the link tree right on top about the mastermind that I'm having. And basically is a conversation that I'll be moderating, and so that we can brainstorm on things that you are seeing that you feel is important to address, or things that you would like to have more information about. Because as a researcher, I just find it crucial to partner. There's no way that we can advance science without you. So, all right, and so go to that ticker and sign up. And without, you know, anything else, then I want to thank you again for joining. Really appreciate it. If you need assistance from me or someone on my team, you can always schedule a time for a consultation. And you can go to, oh, that's the link tree. So if you have any questions, you can also put in the comments that you would like to have more information and that you would like to talk. TALK, put in talk, and we'll be able to help you. And then there we go, OBHM consult, if you would like to have a consultation. All right, and without any further ado, always take care and love your hair. Have a good one. Bye-bye.